Why don't we jump in? It is 5 minutes after. We do have a healthy room. I don't want to hold people back or anything else. And I'm expecting we stop on time, but Laura, it's up to you. If we run a few minutes over and you're cool with that, it's great. We are recording. I'll put this up on YouTube a little later. Laura will have the recording. She may be putting it up someplace also. Um, and I'm excited that this is going to go today. Let me check two things. I did see the record is happening somewhere. I feel like I'm missing that fact. Or you're
It
seeing that
looks like it's
somewhere, right?
recording. Yeah.
You are seeing. Okay, good. All right. Time is now compressed. Yes, that's true. All right. I let me give a couple of administrative things. Okay. I would love people to go ahead and use the chat, and your reaction buttons are also always appreciated. If we're talking about a thing and you agree with it, using your thumbs up, heart, or any other buttons, those are always great. Feel free to test those now if you don't know where they are. Those are great. They definitely give feedback. We were talking a little bit there in our moment before the session of, hey, it's so different now. One of the things that's different is I can't see your faces. So it's hard to know if you're connecting with your audience when you can't see them, right? Because we're all about that nonverbal. That's humans. So you're welcome to turn your cameras on also if you feel like it. But I understand if you don't, because we are on recording and it'll be on YouTube later. So if that bothers you or you're worried about it, totally get it. Otherwise, feel free to use those reaction buttons. I know Laura and I will both appreciate them. It helps us know, okay, people are nodding and doing this in some way. If we see you, that's great. If your buttons are used, that's also great. That's always a very different thing. Conferences have been completely different for me in that way. I used to enjoy seeing my audiences and know they get it. So let's go through where we're going to go today. We are going to have mostly just a conversation. That's what Laura and I have talked about doing. So let's see if I've got my right screen on here. Okay. So a little about me. You probably already know about me. I work at Cognizant's Microsoft Business Group. I am not here today speaking on behalf of Cognizant. My opinions are my own. Same thing with any group I'm talk with or affiliated with, including like the IIBA or the IIBA chapters that I will mention in a little bit, probably. So I just want you to know that. I am speaking only for myself today, and Laura, as far as I know, is speaking only for herself and not on behalf of any organization or group. Sorry, done a bunch of stuff that you might be familiar with. I wrote a book called The Agile Business Analyst, which is out there and was kind of one of the first books to kind of help people make that transition, mostly because I was doing it and people kept asking me questions. I've had a lot of career questions, teaser for today, because of the agility thing. This is like 10 years ago now. Hey, am I going to have to know about this? How is this affecting my work? What is it going to be in the future? I don't know that I want to do this. Companies are asking for it. Some companies don't care. I wound up writing a book about that also. And lately, the IIBA's flagship press book, or the first book of their press, their IIBA publications that wasn't formally the body of knowledge. I got to write that with Steve Adolph and Shane Hasty. It's the Rock Crusher model for flow-based backlog management. It's about advanced backlog techniques, basically. And beyond that, there's stuff about me on the screen. If you don't know, you probably know about this from Eventbrite. If you aren't subscribed to me there, which you probably are because you did this today, but please follow me on Eventbrite or connect with me on LinkedIn. That's how you'll find out things I'm doing. I'm doing another talk next week titled, I think it's Management, Leadership, and Just Getting Your Job Done. And we're going to talk about those kinds of skills then. And today I get an hour sort of with Laura, which is really cool because people keep asking me or have asked me, how do I get started in this field? How do I grow my career? And I can give you my messages, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to share my experience. But Laura does this more professionally than I do in that sense, like helps people get started and helps people grow their careers in that way. I'm passionate about doing the job and helping people do it. Laura helps people make the entry into this. So with that, Laura, I want to turn to you for a minute and I'm going to give you the stage. And if you want to go into how you got started on this, we'll be ahead of our first question. So a little about you and if you want, how you got started.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So, how I got started in helping people get started was way back 15 years ago when I had started just writing a blog called Bridging the Gap, which I can speak on behalf of both myself and Bridging the Gap. It's my company. It's now evolved into a training company specifically for business analysts and very focused on practical, real world, on the job type application, which I think is so critical to everything we're talking about today and moving your career forward. But I got started helping people get started because that's what everybody was asking me. So much similar to you when you were like, I wrote this agile business, or I forget the agile book, because people were asking me how to make that transition. People were asking me, how do I get started as a business analyst? And so I was like, well, I should write a book on it. And so that's where I started, and then realized that part of that process was very much realizing, helping people as well realize like the skills that they had, but also learn those skills, but not just learn them. There were a lot of people coming to me with, I've gone through a 5-day training, or I've taken this master's level program even, and like, but
Right.
I don't actually know how to do what I'm supposed to do, or maybe I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't feel confident in actually doing the work or applying to do the work. And so I really started to offer programs that involved application, meaning when you're in a program with me, you are guided to actually create a business process, write a use case, put together a wireframe, and get feedback on that along the way, so that you're actually out there doing it and building experience and building credibility that way. And we've seen that a lot of times help people, launch into the career. I don't want to get ahead of all the things we're going to talk about, but in terms of how I got into business analysis, it was really very much that same way. I kind of fell into the role. I was a quality assurance engineer. I had like put myself out there to do testing, to learn how to manage, or how to test this database structure, which is a very proprietary system. I'm sure it's not even in place anymore, right? But I had put myself out there to do that. I had learned how data was organized. And then I started to just ask a bunch of questions. And the business analysts were like, we're really tired of you asking questions. Not really. Would you please come on the other side and like be the one that's asking the questions instead of asking us the questions that we have to answer, right? So, but that is kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, but it was really like I demonstrated I had a lot of the skills without really being aware that I had those skills of asking questions, putting together business processes, kind of creating a whole new test framework for the systems we were working on. And that led to a position as a systems analyst in the company. And I've been doing business analysis in some way ever since.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a very normal path into this from my experience also, right?
Yeah.
QAs who keep asking questions frequently get told, "Hey, we have cookies over here. Do you want to come over here and join the dark side of business
Specifically
analysis?"
what I was told, because I was like, no, we're way too busy. She's like, it's a better salary and a better job opportunity. You should really think about this. That was her specific guidance when I was like, no,
And
no,
that,
no, there's way too much to do in QA, because QA is always busy, right? You're always overwhelmed, always overworked.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I felt bad leaving the team for sure.
I think so, but it is a very often a natural progression. Now, there are people who love testing, and I think we're kind of into some of our talking, and that's fine. This is going to be a very organic
Yeah.
conversation, folks. So, a footnote before I jump into it, anything else? If you have questions you specifically want to know about, if you dialed in today because you are the folks who showed up, out of 100 registrations, 24 of the people in this call are people who said, I want to know about this topic. Please put your questions in the chat if you feel like it, because we want to make sure we cover the things for the people who are here. Okay. And we'll see where that goes. So feel free. I will probably pivot to that once in a while. But going back, yeah, that's the kind of progression this is. This is almost never anybody's first job, right? BA work, you have to bring something to it. I usually look at it as personally, you need to bring either product knowledge
Mm.
or technical knowledge, and then you can go to the BA job where you marry them up. And the QA is fine to bring the technical knowledge, right? Or possibly product if they're deep in a particular product. It could be both, right?
Mhm.
But you're almost never the first job out of college or high school or wherever it is you've come from. Nobody says, "Oh, I'm going to grow up to be a business analyst." It's just not common. Even though BA skills are used as we look at how the BA job, the BA role and the domain of business analysis, if you think of the BOC, is applied, how that gets used in a lot of different roles. Right now, we're seeing it in the product ownership role. We're seeing a lot of other things, but yeah, what you did makes complete sense for me. And I guess the 2 cents on my own was I was a complete career changer. I had changed tracks from, I actually was in a PhD program for clinical psych. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. I was wrong. For those of you that are knowing that, I was wrong. I have successfully left 3 graduate programs without completing them in my career. I say I learned agility early from that because each one took me less time to discover I wasn't going to do this thing. The first took me a lot of time and a lot of money. The second took me less time and less money, but still money. And the third took me almost no time and very little money.
Mm.
My apartment burned down. So I discovered in 2 weeks, yeah, this wasn't a priority in my life anymore. And I never went back to it. But the not tongue-in-cheek version is, so I wound up doing some database programming and query support work for a quality assurance group back at Bell South back in the day, which is where I kind of got started in things after I said I'm not doing grad school anymore. And all my friends were technologists, so they helped me learn some of those skills and put them together. And I used all that stuff from therapy school, as it were, about asking open questions, closed questions, definition of problems, exploration of solutions, all kinds of things. Not knowing, I was basically practicing a form of business analysis in a way. I was doing BA work, PM work, and programming, all joined together for my own little project that I would be doing, whatever effort it was. And then I would go do the programming and cycle through those various roles, including, I guess, informally my own QA. It's QAing my own code, which is always a bad practice, but in a small shop, it's what you're going to do. And after things changed a few different times and I discovered what I wanted to do, I said I could go towards PM work or BA work. And the BA job appeared first. And it was much more exciting to me, even though I'd gotten the PM credential, PMI, PMP. And I maintain that because, people like letters after their names. And I just loved it. I said, this is what I want to do. And I kept doing a little explorative programming now and then. I still, it still serves me well when I have to get technical to be able to dive into a database or challenge a programmer who says something's going to take like 6 weeks when I'm saying, why isn't it these things? Or if the reverse sometimes, and I like this role in both agility and as a BA, someone will say, well, that should be fast. It's just this. And I said, have you considered this, and this? Oh, yeah. It's not going to be a week. It's going to be 6 weeks. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure it's 6, but I agree with you. It's way more than a week. So you give me a range and I'll be happy. And for those of you who don't know why I talk about range estimates, I'll do a talk on that. I do a talk on that also. So that's how I got into it. And I just loved it. And then when I learned about agility, I loved that. And I've just kept going in this way because I like helping people do it. And that's kind of where that came from. So let's see about a couple of other questions here. And really, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so please feel free. It doesn't have to be yet. Oh, great. Thank God. We're getting some of those in there. So I think we've already talked about our context, like how we got started. And we've talked a little about how to get started, but I'm going to look at that one question and see. And Laura, let me just turn this to you while I'm looking at this and seeing, like, how do you, because you are an expert at helping people get started. I do it spotty, like if people are asking, I'll help if I can, but I immediately came to you because it's sort of your stock in trade. So let me put that just straight over to you. You're the expert on this.
Yeah.
I've got an opinion, but you're the expert.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it is like when I sat down to write the book, I was like, so part of the story I didn't tell is that when that opportunity came up to be a systems analyst, which was really a business analyst role, I really thought I was just in the right place at the right time. Like I met her in the hallway and she was like, Laura, you should apply for this position. And I was like, if I hadn't been walking down that hallway, like at that time, that opportunity wouldn't have happened. And I really believed that until I sat down to write the book. And I was like, well, really? Like, I think somehow else that conversation would have come to be. It just happened to be at that time because I was walking down that hallway. Right. So there was this process of like, well, what did I really do? And then there were interviews that I did with other BAs that were kind of in a very similar spot about how they got in. And I saw these themes, like there was themes of people who kind of got assigned to a really exciting project, often from the business side as a business subject matter expert. There were themes of people who were more on the technical side and were doing kind of like the outreach to the business side, which sounds like, maybe more a little bit more of your path, Rylan. So I really just saw how important it was to build experience and to not necessarily focus on the title or being told to do a business analysis activity, but just to start doing some sort of business analysis, sort of put your name in the hat to be put on a project of some sort to do anything related to business analysis as a way of getting started. But also kind of consciously building that skill set, right? Of, oh, I could analyze the process I do in my work and put together a well-structured document. And as I started kind of guiding people in that path, I also saw most people who thought they weren't business analysts actually had a ton of business analysis skills already. And so I would see people who were like, how do I get started? And I would ask them, well, what are you doing right now? And they would essentially describe, 50 to 80% of a business analyst role. And so the piece that became really important was not just go out and try to build this experience, but also do an inventory of the experience and the skills that you already have and relate them to business analysis. So, if you've ever done a Word document or created some sort of a visual model, and look and figure out what is the actual BA skill that relates to, and use that as a way to really strengthen your positioning. So those are two key things. And I do have a skills assessment that I can share in the chat. It's a free download we offer, which I'll do like when we get to that in a minute. But I think it's just a great, like, it's so important to take that inventory of what am I actually doing and how, like, what have I actually done before and how can I relate that to business analysis? Because often you're not starting from like a 0 point. You are starting from something and you can build from there.
That sounds great. I
Yeah.
am just scanning the chat as we're talking. If you would drop that link into the
Yep,
chat,
for
the free
sure.
download thing, that would be awesome. I think a lot of people could benefit from that, and maybe we'll circle back on that one a little bit later on.
Yeah.
I'll take over for a second. I was thinking, let me
Yeah.
give you my view on some of how you get started, because I agree, a lot of it is accidental. It's being invited into the club, as it were, right?
Mhm.
But if that isn't happening, and I think that's a few people I'm seeing things like that. You're in a lateral position. I saw one person was talking about Salesforce admin to full on BA, which I acknowledge those are not the same thing. Salesforce analyst or admin and BA skills, they are related. There's some overlap, but it's not a giant overlap if you look at it on its face. So you're going to have to show people what's the difference. So if you're in a spot, this is my 2 cents on it for the generic, right? If you're not in a spot where you can just get invited in, or someone's noticing you as kind of hand raiser, right? How might you raise your hand and be seen and be in and then get that kind of thing? One, it always helps to have your manager as an advocate and helping develop you and introduce you to someone who manages the BA group, the organization there, and either hopefully your company can help with a little, I'm not necessarily going to say mentoring, but if they look at their bench of analysts and say, we're going to open an associate or junior level position, that might be a great next job. And even if it's lateral for you, I would highly encourage that, because being in title matters a lot for your career. Okay. Now, secondarily to that, if it doesn't happen that way, and you're what I think of as a bit of a career changer, or you want to be seen outside your company as a BA possibility, either as a junior or a regular level or a senior, depending on how much experience you have and you can bring to bear. You have to surface it. You have to show it, and it has to align to the BOC. Okay. I am happy to look at resumes and see what kind of experience somebody might have had. Now, it might be a little different because I will pay attention to that. But when somebody says, I had one person who said, well, I could do the BA job. And I said, really? Great. Show me your resume. And I looked at it. This was just at a conference or something. Someone was asking me, why do I not get a BA job? I said, you don't have a BA job. You have 15 or 20 years of experience and you don't have one BA job title. Show me the analysis work. Oh, well, I analyze stuff all the time. Like, I see developer title after developer title. I don't see software analyst anywhere. What analysis type of work are you doing? Well, I have to figure out requirements every time I'm doing things. No, you figure out how to do the work, right? But you're given requirements. Well, yeah, but I have to figure out what they mean. Like, I'm not saying, I just had to say this person, I said, I'm not seeing it. I would not, you would not be my first look for a BA candidate when I'm looking for a job based on what you're doing. If you want to show me how at least 50 to 80% of some part of your job is actually figuring out what the requirements are versus just how to technically meet them, then we can talk about that. But if you can't show me some experience in that space, you might be a great software analyst candidate, but I don't think you can be a business analyst candidate. You have to start further up the funnel. And I think they were annoyed with me, is the truth. But I'm using that as the counterexample. If you're in that spot that Laura was talking about earlier, of you're doing a lot of analysis work, or you wonder if you are, review it with a friendly BA, and your local IIBA chapter is a great place to find such people. including online. Okay. They'll help you look over what you've done, see how it can align to the BOK, the body of knowledge, if you aren't already familiar with it, the business analyst body of knowledge, the BA BOK, and say, all right, you're right, there is a lot of stuff here, and also identify your gaps. So I think those are some of the ways. And then if you're lucky enough to, circling back, to go internal and find people who are open to considering you for whatever the move might be, or if they won't, you have a way to look externally, and you just need to position yourself appropriately with recruiters and so on. Okay, Laura, did you want to add anything else to that, or should we take our next question?
Yeah, I just would say like from that software, because like there's this kind of focus on the analysis that I think that example is bringing up, right? And so for somebody with a more technical background, or I saw like in the chat, one of the people was more an admin background, which maybe sometimes is more similar, right? There's like this outreach piece that's needed for both of those roles of how do I actually go to the business? So could it be how I demo my software and get feedback? Could it be the kinds of questions I'm asking about the requirements, right? So just somebody from a more technical background often needs to move more towards the business side, which is the asking of questions, the understanding of the business process, the how to talk about technology in business friendly language, that kind of piece. And somebody from the business side needs to move more towards the tech side, which is going to be more of the analytical skills and the software, like the technology understanding, not how to code, but how to think about what's functional in that software, which is a set of techniques in business analysis. So like just, I think, the what skills to focus on are different based on what background you're coming from as well. So just to pull that piece out of what you shared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me, there's a thing I think of, and I think we both use this a lot in the BA space, but I'm wondering if it applies here also. If we think about a lot of software development, and not every BA works in software, let's acknowledge that. However, it's so common, it's almost, assumed that people do. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make that assumption, but if that's not you, put it in the chat and we'll try to figure out how to help you also. BAs like to look at things as the why, the what, and the how. Often we talk about that. I use that as the three big spaces I work in, and I try to remember which I'm in when I'm working. So I talk the right way, and I'm either solutionful or solutionless. That's my preferred way to think about things. Technical professionals are often in the how. They're just deep into the how. And the why is nice to know, but the what is essential, and then they're supposed to figure out the how. As BAs, we're shoved into the what a lot. And I think this will be the thing about seniors, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I think you push into the why a lot. You challenge in an appropriate, constructive way. Why? I see what you want, and I know that person can figure out exactly how to do it, even if I don't happen to know or do know. But why do you want it? What problem are we solving? Does this solve the problem? And so on. So I'm just thinking, I tend to talk to people a little about the why, the what, and the how. And I'm wondering if that would help in thinking about your resume stuff and the skills base. Like if you are talking about why and what, you have a lot of BA content to discuss. If you're only in the lower part of the how, the what and the how, then you need to build upwards in a sense. Does that?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's go to our next thing here. Click. Okay. So I will throw this to you first and then Coda on it because I want to stop. I don't want to keep putting the ends at your periods at the end of your sentences.
And
So
we've
what do
got
you
some
think
great
about
questions
this?
in the chat too, right? So we'll get into those. Yeah.
And if you see one that you would love to pivot to, by the way, Laura, please
Okay.
just say, hey, I'd love to talk to that one. I think
All
it's
right.
important. This
Sounds
is
good.
great. What do you feel makes somebody stand out? And I put with this like the advancing in your career as a BA, because I think those are kind of linked, but if they're different, feel free to mention. If not, feel free to talk about them the same. What's your
Yeah, I mean, so I think this question is assuming you have that foundational skill set, right? So this is assuming you know how to do business analysis, you've got those foundational pieces in place. And I think what makes a business analyst stand out is this sense of proactivity. So, and it's like there's so many ways we need to be proactive as a BA. We need to be proactive in understanding why we're doing a project versus just the what and the how, as you mentioned, but we need to be proactive in understanding what our role is. This is one question from Jerry. I did want to make sure to answer a little bit, like, what do I do? I'm in this new business analyst role, right? What do I do in the first 30 to 60 days? I think that can be really like understanding what that role is in that company is like the first thing to do. What does business analysis look like here? And what are the expectations? And I know that sounds like it should be like implied, but so often people have misconceptions about what you're supposed to do. And I've just seen so many people get into new roles and kind of like be doing like all the right things that are written in all the right books. And then the stakeholders like, what is this? It is not what I was thinking a BA was. And it's like their lack of understanding about a business analyst role, but it really affects you individually, right? So individually, you want to make sure you really know what that role is. So that's part of being proactive. Is here's what I think I can bring to business analysis. Is that what you're expecting, or do we need to adjust it? But also like as issues come up, just that proactivity of taking ownership of issues. That's kind of how I got into business analysis in the first place, because I was the one like, oh, I'll take that like nasty thing nobody wants to handle, or like that problem, not, and figure it out and figure out how to solve that. And I think that that really sets people apart too, as well as, especially as you get into more senior level roles, finding like the avenues where you can apply your skill set in new and interesting ways to keep your career growing forward. And like really being clear on here's what the outcome I can achieve using the skill set I have that helps you keep growing and expanding. So that proactivity to me is something that really stands out. Yeah.
So proactivity and a problem investigation mindset, it sounds like to me.
For sure. For
Three
sure.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I think of some similar things. Like one of the things, and you just so everybody's clear, I think I expect more of these kinds of qualities the more senior someone is. Okay. When someone's just in an entry position in a junior or standard level, even depending on where they come from and what they're bringing to the table, right? I don't, I mean, initiative is nice, but I also want them for a while to be learning, right?
Mm.
It's knowing the right things to take initiative on is an important thing to know, in my opinion. So I just want to make everybody know, it's not like you should run out and solve everything. Do it appropriately to your environment. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes people, they have what you think is an obvious problem to solve. I'm going to point this out because I've seen this trip up a BA or two. Remember that the person has to want the problem solved. Okay. They may have other priorities. You may see it as crisis and critically important and no big deal, and you could do it easily. But if it takes away from their really important thing that their boss is on them about, it's not important to them. And you need to respect those choices. Okay. It's a little thing from therapy school we had. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change. Okay. A little bit of that applies in the BA space. So what makes somebody stand out? I usually have a couple of go-tos. One is don't be an order taker, again, aligned to appropriate skill level. Just because somebody brings you a requirement doesn't mean it's right. Just because someone gives you a what doesn't mean you're not entitled to the why, right? You need to be able to know these things line up and challenge appropriately. So the thing I find for BAs a lot that I really like is remember, work is done by people. You have to have a solid domain of professional skills in the sense of technical BA skills. That's what I would call technical there, but also that human interaction skill set is really critical the more you are senior, because you operate from a position of influence without authority as a BA. You will rarely ever be in charge of anything except the requirements work. So you need to know how to work with people successfully and meet them where they are and collaborate and identify where you can and can't be successful at those things, and then figure out how you will be successful anyway. How do you build those things with people? So that's how I see it. Those are some of the things. Now, beyond that, a lot of the basics that make anyone successful in a job, which is setting and meeting expectations, communicating if expectations are going to change. Like if you're going to be late with a deliverable, don't tell everybody about it the day you're going to be late. If you know you're going to be late because you need more time or something's going on, you communicate that about that ahead, and you invite the team to collaborate with you and help you figure out what to do if needed. Okay. But you don't surprise people with problems, right? That's not a great idea. So those are some of the things. But I think that creativity, problem solving, initiative, not being an order taker, and as I like to say, also knowing your process and your plan. That's a thing. If you don't know about that, It's a couple of videos I have on context diagrams on YouTube. Take a look at that. It'll tell you a little about why I think that's important. I don't want to take the airtime today for it. I am. I'm also, in case you haven't noticed, I'm going to turn the share on and off because I'm realizing putting a white screen up all that much is just probably not helping us. So, Laura, do you want any last words on that? Or I saw a little bit in the chat. Let me give it to you for a minute.
Yeah, I think just in addition, like kind of that basic level of having a process framework of some sort. Like we have a process framework as well at Bridging the Gap that we share and train people on, but it's surprisingly uncommon, right? That BAs feel like they have to make it up as they go along versus and it's like a tension because in one way it is totally true that every project is different, every team is unique. You want to manage around your stakeholders and the environment and the structure of the team and what the development team needs to be successful, but also having some sort of an approach and like going in with the like this is the way I do things, not in a structured rigid in a structured way but not in a rigid inflexible way, right? Here are the steps I walk you through as a business analyst. Often it just gives you that confidence and it also helps manage the expectations, but also kind of helps people build that assurance in you too. Like, oh, they're not just looking for me to tell them what to do. Like they do have an approach, they do have a way of doing things, and they're not just making it up as they go along and kind of like trying to like overwhelmed by the fire hose of information that's coming at them, because there will be, when you're doing your job well, there will be a fire hose of information and you need a strategy and a structure to work through and navigate that kind of information, to use it to analyze and actually get to the clarity that you want at the end.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's a thing. You said a thing and it made me have a spur to a different direction for a second, which is how do you
Yeah.
know you're winning as a BA in some ways? Like, I think one of the
Mhm.
marks there, you said about, how the fire hose just kind of gets gets to be more and more and more of one in some ways.
Mhm.
It does when you're being successful because everybody then understands that you hear them, you see them. They want you to take their requirements. They want you to be the point of contact and the doorway, which sometimes it is, into the IT organization for them because they know they'll be heard. And think about how frustrating it must be to be inside the business, to feel like you have to go through this BA for good reasons if you're in our space, right? We know why it matters. There's a lot of good reasons to have a BA in the middle or involved, but they feel like we're a gatekeeper sometimes. When
Mhm.
you are asked for by name, you should make note of that because it means you've hit a certain level of confidence with your stakeholders and the customers and everyone else you serve. So I think that's when the fire hose is going to keep growing. Okay, let's go to the next question there for a minute. I'm going to share my screen for just a second. I guess I'll try this practice and put that on and off here and there. So we were talking about communities of practice and growing your network because sometimes getting started as a BA, your company is great at having the community in place. Like there's ways to grow you into it, and there's a framework set up to help you become better at it, and so forth. And other companies, as I see one of the folks in our chat is having, they're dropped into it. They've got the background to be successful, and they believe they do, and the client or whoever they're going to be a BA for now, as I saw someone discussing there, believes it as well, and they're going to jump in. But maybe they want some support outside work because one reason I always find that valuable, and then I'm going to stop on this and give it right to Laura, is how do we how do you how do you maintain your ability to figure out what you're going to do and grow and be successful when you don't always want to be vulnerable about what you don't know at your job because you want to maintain your image and your professional appearance. And there's a certain level of vulnerability that at different points in my career, as I've gotten more mature in my career, I'm more comfortable with that vulnerability because I know how much stock in trade I have. But when I was first starting off, there was a certain amount of question I was comfortable with, and I still needed some other people because I might need to hear something like 5 times. And I didn't want to go all 5 to my boss. So that was where I'm saying early on, it is super helpful to have more of a network. Laura, what's your perspective on those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, in my very first role, I had my manager was not a practicing business analyst, so I had access to people on my team, and I was really lucky to have an on-the-job mentor who allowed me to work with her on her first, not on her first project, on my first project, and then like I slowly took over pieces and then got assigned a huge project all of a sudden. But one of the things I did there was start a, I didn't call it a community practice. I know that, that's really common today. We just called it a peer review meeting. And so it was four of us, the four business analysts on the team, and we would get together every other week and review use cases were like the major thing that we were doing. And so we would review each other's use cases. So somebody would propose something, and it started out just with like whatever use case was up for them. And then as we got kind of this baseline of understanding of where people were and kind of, a lot of alignment came out of that, like people were doing things differently. And so we started to standardize a bit how we were approaching that. And then we would bring kind of our trickiest, most difficult problems and challenges to those meetings. And it was a great group and you learned from both sides. Like I learned a lot, obviously, when I was getting feedback, but then also even the confidence as a new business analyst to be able to provide feedback to one of my senior level peers of like notice something that or ask a question that they weren't thinking of. And so like that gave me a lot of confidence too, of just like I actually like it really embedded the skill set for me. So I really, even just with a few people on your team who might be interested, having a session like that on an ongoing basis can be really, really helpful, where you're talking about what you're doing and you're sharing documentation and providing feedback on it. I also think looking beyond your organization is really important, because what happens, and this is what happens in our programs, it's like we teach the standardized skill set, and then you see people doing it from multiple different industries, and you realize, one, the way that you're doing something applies in a lot of different industries. And so some people can get kind of thinking like, oh, I have to do it this way because my company is so unique or specific. And it's like, no, actually, what I'm learning as a skill is really transferable to this completely other industry over here because my end product looks very similar to theirs. And also like, oh, I just noticed like something that they could correct or a question that they could ask. And it gives you that same kind of confidence too. So I think within your company is one way, but then also looking at ways to interact with business analysts outside your company. And this is where IIBA also provides a lot of resources. I know you're very involved with some of the local chapters, but just like, getting into the room where you can talk to other business analysts about their role. And especially starting to have conversations about challenges and review documentation and review approaches to things can make that even more concrete and specific.
How do you feel about folks approaching like more senior BAs or
Mm,
leadership BAs in their own company and saying, listen, every now and then, would you be willing to give me a deep review of one or another documents? And
mm.
it's not going into my formal review or anything. I'm not asking you for that. Just give me brutally honest feedback about what I've done. And it's not their job necessarily, but seeing if they would be willing to give you that
For
feedback.
sure. Yeah, I think asking for that feedback, but also what can help make that more palatable, because that person might also be overworked, right, and have too much to do, is to be really clear about what feedback you need. So, and try to hone it down. So not, can you look at this 50-page or 10-page document and just give me your feedback, but more, I'm really struggling with this piece, right? Or is there a model that I could add that would help? Like just kind of giving them some guidance so they know what to look for, because that might be a really easy thing for them to do, versus can you complete an end-to-end documentation review on
Oh
this
God,
entire
yes.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about the time piece. And just so people are aware, when I said that in my head initially, it was maybe in advance of finishing it, but really you can do it with an artifact you've completed. And
Mm,
that way the other person doesn't have any time pressure. You can say, this was like my best work on a thing, and I want to take it to the next level. And then
mm,
they can, apply everything Laura just said also, right? Of ask them what you want to know. Like if they have time and they offer to do a detailed review, awesome. But she's right, we don't always have that. But like, I'm looking for structure. I'm looking to see if you thought maybe there's a gap. Did I organize things? Is there a better way I could have organized it? Just whatever your thing is, or please just read the first 5 to 10 pages if you can, whatever is sensible for you. But that way you take the time pressure off by this is already in the can. I don't, you don't have any deadline.
Mm.
It's okay if I check back with you in 2 weeks. Is that okay? They'll appreciate being asked in the sense if it's a compliment, then their time might be thinner than anyone in this room would think.
Yeah, and also, I mean, my first experience, I was updating that senior person's use cases. Like, so I was sitting in
Mm.
on her meetings, and then I was responsible for the meeting notes and responsible for making the updates to those use cases. And then she was reviewing that and providing feedback. And, meeting notes is not the end all be all of business analysis. I never want to say that, but it's a great way to start to have a voice in a meeting, especially if you're not a BA, to be the one who's taking the notes. And it's becoming less and less common with AI tools, I know, but it can be a way to be like, oh, I actually didn't get that quite right for the notes. Could somebody clarify this or what that term means, right? It gives you a bit of a voice, but also gave me a lot of exposure and a lot of feedback on those updates, and it helped her. So it became a win-win. I think it was a huge luxury to have that assignment where I think I wasn't put on my own project right away, but it really was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot we could wish for there. It is great when you have someone who's helping to grow you.
Yeah.
It's just, and that's why I think I know when Laura and I were talking ahead about this, like that networking piece, if you can't find that in your company or whatever it is, if you can't find it locally, your IIBA chapter is really a group of people who are invested in this profession. And it's where people are going if they're willing to help out or if they're looking for help, in which case, you get enough people together, it's good. So
Yeah.
just that. Laura, last word on this one, if you have any.
Not to overly plug, but this is why I do what I do, and we
Yeah.
provide this in our programs as well, right? So like if you're hitting those roadblocks, because so many people are, I do this in our programs, and we provide it in a community so that everybody learns for each other. So I'd be happy to chat with you more about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a thing that everybody should remember. I'm going to sound a little funny here for a minute, but I know this is a weird thing in our community, and I'm gonna take a liberty of talking about it for a second. BAs, for some reason, often have this mindset of we're not going to go out and pay for any training. And
Mm.
that I've encountered that when I've priced training where, look, I've developed an entire class and I'm doing that. And it's a thing. I hear it from IIBA chapter leaders that it's a frustrating thing sometimes because getting experts in to teach classes who are professionals, who are making a living by doing so, such as Laura, right? I do things outside of work because I love it, but that lets me say yes and no to whatever I feel like saying yes and no to, or scaling my time. But most people you want to get in are going to be people who are doing it for a living. So I'm just saying, please remember to invest in yourself. It is, you should carve out some funds for it. I'm not saying you have to spend them willy-nilly. Find the right thing to do, but I have paid for training classes for myself, and been incredibly happy I did so when I did so. Things like that. You can also approach a lot of professionals. I know a couple of people where, yes, the class is priced at $1,500 for, a 2-month class or a weekend class or whatever it is. But sometimes if they have a full class, they're willing to cut a deal for a few more students if the class is not full. Okay.
Mm.
Things like that. I'm not proposing everybody ask everybody about it, but I am saying you can always check. But understand the answer, maybe no. But I know a few people who will do that if they can, for a small number of people. That happens. Okay, going back to our thing, Laura, I was actually looking ahead, and I will put our slides up again at some point, but we've covered it already because that is how things work. Most of the questions we had about what are the most important skills to have, we kind of touched on that. We had one which is what are you doing differently this year? And I'm thinking, if it's all right with you, I would love for you to pick a thing from the chat to talk
Mm.
to maybe take. And I know I've got one in my mind, or I've got two. So if you pick the one I was thinking of, I've got a different one maybe. And
I
the
really
one
like the one that just came in from Jerry, but there's so
jump
many
in,
good ones.
jump in, go right ahead.
Yeah, I also like Anna's there too, but we kind of talked about the skills. Um, let's see. So yeah, this is like right. So the processes out there are so formal, if I'm understanding you, Jerry, especially like if you try to do everything in the Baybach, a lot of employers are going to push back at you, right? And that no one has the time and the patience to do everything that you want or need to do. And so this is where like the expectations piece, but also like just choosing the one thing. Like, what is the one thing that you would add that would make a difference? And I hear a lot though too about, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, Rylan, but like particularly executives pushing back on the why questions, right? Like we don't need to answer why. We already know why we're doing this. Just go figure out the requirements. Right? Like that's such a
Right.
big one. And it's like so frustrating that we're still dealing with that. Um, but I think, the counter to that is like, well, if we don't understand the why, and I can't help the team understand the why, like we can very easily go off in the right direction and not fulfill the full vision of what you're looking for. And we're going to be making bad decisions at a more detailed level. But also like kind of just trying to sneak it in. All right, we're not going to talk about the why. Let's talk about the what. And then part of the what is like, well, why is that so important? Right? Or why did we make that decision? Or coming up with ways to get to that understanding without actually saying that that's what you're doing. Like, sure, let's talk about the scope or review this vendor proposal, but then kind of come in with some of those questions that at least help get some of that more contextual information that you need. But Rylan, I'm sure you face this challenge too.
I do. I deal with it in consulting also,
Mhm.
where as a consultant working at a consulting company, often by the time I get in the room, they're like, all of that's already in the SOW. I'm just here to tell you requirements. I'm like, let me show you what's in the SOW sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it actually doesn't say that. Actually, the SOW says this. What? You weren't the person who signed it, were you? No, I was just told this is what you knew. I'm like, I don't. So let's recap to make sure we're on the same page. And I will tell you that as a consultant who has been asked to assist with improving overall consulting situations, again, I'm not speaking for my employer. I'm telling you, I've done this at multiple companies. Okay. As a consultant, a senior professional asked to say, we see engagements go wrong like this. And it's the same stuff I saw inside company. Okay. And the top basic answer for our conversation here is nobody talked about why we want what we want and what problem we were solving and why we believe this is the problem to solve. This is what a solution would look like, and this is what we're going to build that meets that solution. Because if you can draw a straight line through those things, you are likely to be in the right place. If you're not, then you're going to spend all of that expensive consulting money and no one's going to be happy. And as consultants, that's not a thing we want. We don't make more. Consultants' best situation is to be with a client who wants repeat business. Okay. And you don't want repeat business from somebody who's expensive and doesn't solve your problem. Picture if you were fixing your car, your house, you would not go back to that person because they didn't understand what you wanted, right? Sometimes it's really straightforward. I need that window replaced. Here's the new window. Fix that, do that. But if your SOW didn't include, oh, you wanted the exterior of the window painted, you never said that. Well, why wouldn't you? Because you never said you wanted it. The document you handed me said this. So two or three things, because I think I went off on a tangent there for a minute. The BOC, to go to Jerry's specific question, which is the BOC is very, very big and super process oriented and super formal. The BOC is not a how-to guide. It is a what is it you're actually doing? And my view is it's a language to explain the things you are already doing in the same way that a mechanic's guide breaks down a car into component pieces that you can then understand what might be right and wrong and what you're doing with it. And that there are brakes that slow the car down, assuming it's a gasoline engine, because an electric car also has a way of slowing down, but it's not using brakes, is it? It's using a reverse system of regenerative braking, right? It's using a motor on the wheel in a reverse format to regenerate some electricity. The way it slows the car down is fundamentally different than a gasoline engine car, which uses a brake. So that's a bit of a why, right? The solution would be very different. To go back to some of our thinking there, right? The why, the what, the how. Those two different brake systems are hows. They both slow the car down, but one of them throws out so much electricity effectively that could be recaptured and extend the range of your car. That's why the why matters, right? The why would be different for those two solutions. Getting away from it a little bit, the BOC tells you a language with which you can talk about things. It was really powerful for me to be able to say, all right, these requirements are stated requirements, not refined requirements. I need to state them, review them, and I can then present them as refined, approved requirements. I now know I'm doing elicitation. I can talk about workshops. I can talk about different kinds of models. I found that to be the thing. And then the thing to talk about to continue Jerry's thread here a little bit, which is the soft skills I was describing, right? People slow down when they are seen and understood. Probably the reason a stakeholder won't give you their time is they don't think it's a valuable use of their time. You have to work with them to persuade them otherwise and then deliver on the promise. And I'm saying this to Jerry in a sense because these are his questions, but I think these are valid for everyone, which is why I'm so happy we're focusing on this for a minute.
Yeah.
And just by the way, Laura, I know we're approaching the hour. You let me know if we can go a little further or not. We'll
Yeah, you can
accommodate
go
whatever
like 5
fits.
to 10 minutes over.
And
Yeah.
I know many of you will have to drop off. We'll just have it in the recording for later. So that's where the soft skills come in, where you're saying to someone the kind of thing I just said about the car, right? How can I, as your advocate, my 40 hours, consultative or not, are going to be spent in the service of getting you the thing you want. And in my case, I'm the guy who actually, in my job description, I am responsible to ensure that the requirements of the solution meet the goals of the business as we have contracted. That's my job. That is my job description. And if it doesn't, then someone's going to yell at me about that. To give you the best service I can with my very expensive time, right? Because as a consultant, I'm always more expensive than someone in-house. Then I need to make sure I understand why you want what you want. And that way, when I'm acting on your behalf as your agent, I understand your vision and I know what to ask you in details and I know what to how to help somebody who wasn't in all those meetings because the rest of my team isn't going to be in every requirements meeting. I have to represent it to them, right? Or to a group of them. I have to know more about the why and the big picture to be successful on your behalf, right? And then you can have a few examples that fit your particular universe. Like the carpentry one was a little on the fly, but it probably works, right? Think of how many times how many times would that happen in your own world in one way or another, where something we have a great statement, right? If a requirement is said, if something you want is stated, it's a requirement. If it wasn't stated, it's an expectation, which is still something somebody wants, but nobody knew about it. And that's not going to get you where you want to be. So there's that one.
I
Uh,
will also say sometimes like you're on a project that doesn't have the buy-in it needs. Sometimes it's like the wrong project. Sometimes
yeah.
like the stakeholders don't know why like nobody's told them why, so there can also be issues outside of your interaction with them where escalating and getting buy-in from a higher level stakeholder can be really important as well to help engage all the people that need to be engaged. So um, there's things that we can do as business analysts to really engage people. One of my favorites too is just presenting some sort of visual model, like a wireframe or a process map, because often like that engages a different part of people's brains. And so if you put a draft together, even if it's just like, here are the 3 steps that I think are part of this process, like what am I missing? Right. And like often like that kind of conversation can be more engaging. Um, and so that kind of thing can help, but sometimes it's just people don't know why they're even being asked questions, right? And so some of that education and like network of stakeholders and influence is really important too.
Yeah, yeah. Help them to understand why you're in the room.
Yeah.
What they may not know. They may not have any idea. I've run into that a few times in my career too. It's that thing of like when I said about that being a brand name, being a BA they request by name, which was kind of cool when that happened to me a couple of times. It's because they've gotten commodity BA who didn't ask, didn't understand, and maybe just gave what they said. And so that's what they expect. But that's not what you want to do. That's not going to help you get advance your career. So I'm looking at this, I'm seeing 2 questions I'd really love to take. I want to see if
Yeah.
Laura, if you're cool with them.
Yeah.
One is about from Robert earlier on about role boundaries, like what's near and so forth. And it sounded to me about certain how you interact with people, which is one reason I love this. Like who are you going to work with and how do you work with them? And then I saw a couple of questions about transitioning back into the role. And I guess the thing was kind of about how do you pick up SQL was one of them, but that's basically go to some training stuff. I hate to tell you, there's some great books on it, but think about that. I really would love to take that particular one though about um,
Yeah,
the
I'm glad you
role
brought that up
boundaries and
because I
intimacy.
had put in a link, but I had missed like, we were trying to like talk and
Yeah,
read the chat and I had totally misunderstood that question. So yes, I was like, well,
absolutely.
lead the business analysis. That's not the question Robert was asking at all.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough
So
choice.
this is so interesting. This is a topic I have been thinking about a lot over the last couple of months. I've always been thinking about the business analysis role, but where I'm like the framework that I'm starting to work from, or the mindset, is just there is this set of business analysis skills, and they are so essential to a wide variety of roles that include project managers, change managers, testers, product owners, product managers, Salesforce admins, like functional analysts, systems analysts, process analysts, right? There's a tree visual from IIBA that shows this like branch of all the roles. And so I think this question of like, where do certain roles stop and other roles start is like to define that from an industry way and say, this is the way it should be. It's just like, we're always going to be splitting hairs and fine tuning and kind of going in different directions. It's a decision that needs to happen in a project when you're working with people, either in a project or maybe in a set of teams that are working together in a consistent way in an organization, right? You just need to make those decisions in your organization and kind of step away from this. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to define these roles. It's like, what people do we have on the team? What skills do they bring? How can we best leverage those skills to have a successful outcome? And what, from an individual level, what kinds of roles are you willing to take on, and be really clear about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, even if you've been really successful at doing it in the past, so that you're fulfilling a role that matters to you and that grows your career. So that's my take on that. I know that's a little bit strong, Rylan, but
No, that's cool.
yeah,
And that's great because it's a
yeah,
different thing. And, you know, this is the great thing about, as an example about business analysis. I read that question and I was thinking about how do I interact with other people
for sure.
on the job as it, but you're also saying like, where do people have ownership and over what? I think
Yeah,
we might be taking a little slightly different takes on this, which is fine. I don't know how the author meant it. That's the other thing
yeah.
about writing, right? So that said, I look at this and I'm thinking, I'm borrowing from agility here, where you're either a voice or a vote on a thing. Okay, I
Mm,
use that a lot in my work. I like to say, look, I am a voice on the technical decisions, but I'm not a vote, because at the end of the night, I will not, you know, if something breaks in the middle of the night and you've got a Sev 1 outage, I don't get the call. There's no world in which the BA gets the phone call because the system is down and said, unless you give me a requirement, we can't get this thing back working. That's not the world we live in, right? That's not how Sev 1s get handled. I might get involved if there's many Sev 1s to do some root cause analysis and work with people about what the heck's going on here. But that's, you know, it's really still a technical domain in a lot of ways. On the other hand, you know, but because I have a technical background and I've been a database programmer, done some web development, and I've done a bunch of query and SQL stuff, I have a voice, but I'm not the guy with the decision. So I can have any feelings I want about it, but that's how I feel. That's how I see it. Similarly, in reverse, the requirements are my responsibility. I get a vote, but remember, I look at being a BA, I only win if everyone around me wins, right? I don't have a stake in the game except to make sure everyone else wins, right? I make sure the client gets what they want, the technologists are successful at giving the client what they want, and that everyone's delighted by it at the end of the day, whether it's the end users beyond the client or whoever, right? That's where I see it. I only win if everyone around me wins. So I have a vote about how the requirements will be formed and what we will do to gather and validate those requirements, and maybe to validate the solution after. Like, I get involved in UAT a lot sometimes in terms of writing the UAT guide. What will we test? What will we base our acceptance on? And what won't we? Right? Because they were never part of scope. So we're not going to assume that people will get that in UAT, right? So I look at it that way. I kind of look at who's got the primary responsibility for a thing and who has input. It's not quite a racy. That's more complicated than I need it to be, but I tend to think voice or vote. And then, of course, some people's voices get to be louder than others, especially if they're writing the check. You know, there are some things. So, and I think that comes back to the soft skills, because sometimes you have to do a particular deliverable for a client because it's really critical to them. I mean, in terms of as a BA, like an artifact of some kind. But but you may not feel it has additional value to what you're doing, but it has additional value because it helps them listen to everything else you want to say. And that's a soft skills component. So I think there's that. And I guess Robert, and I don't recall if Robert's still on the line here. Robert, if you want to add to that in any way, either in text or raising your hand or something, I'll try to keep an eye out for that. But I guess I'm just thinking, this is that intersection of how do you collaboratively work with the people around you to bring out the best stuff for whatever your goal is. That's what I'm thinking. So I just want to throw that out there. Laura, was there another one that maybe caught your eye? And then I think we'll wrap up after one more question, I think is what we'll do. Oh, you're on mute or did something happen?
Yeah, we had an airplane go by, so I muted myself. Yeah, you had one, right?
I think, well, I thought that was the one. So if you, I'll look for one
Oh,
more just in case, because I know there's someone talking mentioned about SQL and uh
I don't
um
have any advice on SQL. That is one skill I have never
I'll
learned.
there's two things. Let's look at this for a minute. Progressions, I think, was the reason I like this. So it's by Matthew. It's towards the earlier part of our chat. It was two questions. Okay, I see you see it. How do we get started learning SQL? Can you recommend any places to start? There was a series of books that I had read a while back, this way before the internet was as good at what it does today. Yes, I'm showing my age, but that is probably done by my beard, which I trimmed up, and it's way grayer than I remembered it being even last week. So there's that. It was basically like teach yourself SQL or teach yourself such and such a thing in 30 days, and it had easy lessons that were well chunked. Today, of course, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, any number of things have things out there that are free. There's a lot of teach yourself stuff. I would just suggest Googling on that topic. What you need to learn could vary. So I would just say the basics of SQL, select statements. For BAs, being able to do, I'll say this much, take this as if you want, this is my view on SQL for BAs. Know how to do select statements, understand how a relational database works. What's the fundamental part of how they work? What is the point of using a relational database, right? And then from there, you should be able to do an entity relationship diagram. That is a foundational BA skill. It's not foundational, it's a little more advanced, but it is an important BA skill. Okay.
Yeah, we teach it as a foundational skill. I don't think of it as SQL, but we
Yeah,
teach
it's
entity. I think what it's just such a different view. Sorry to interrupt you, but I
no,
just want to
please.
like it's such a different view, like on like the requirements and how things are organized that grasping it is how you grasp how relational databases work if you're not learning SQL,
You're right.
without, yeah. So
Yeah, I
it's
tend to come from
it's
that because I'm
key.
in the BA background, but I agree with you. It's
Yeah.
I didn't like backing off of that, so I'm glad you held me accountable. It's like, yeah, it's pretty foundational. I guess I just don't expect it of an entry level BA. I would
Mm,
like it, but I wouldn't
yeah.
expect it at the entry level. Mid level, yeah, you need to know this.
Yeah.
All right, and then his real question there, and I'm going to check if I see a few things in the chat. I'll make sure I'm not missing anything after I read this. I'm a business analyst with a CBAP designation. I want to continue to progress my career. Continue considering the PM. I guess it's covering up with a thing over here. Okay, the PMP and becoming a project manager or getting an MBA to support my desire to manage and take on more responsibility. What about career progression and things after a BA? And Laura, I'm going to give this topic entirely for you because you are. I mean, maybe I'll come in there, but and talk about it at the end. But I feel like I want to let you have the last word on this one. So you go
Oh,
ahead.
well, thank you for that. This has been great, by the way. Thank you so much for having me here, Ryland. And I think, if you feel called towards project management and the PMP, then straight away, like go for it, right? Like but there are so many opportunities. So like that is not, and I think we're beyond the industry thinking that BAs are like junior PMs or like the career path is from BA to PM. I've actually helped a lot of people help project managers become BAs because they were doing a bit of it as a project manager and realized that's where they wanted to focus. But like it's not the only path, right? So really think like one, do you want to grow more on the business side or the technology side? Do you want to grow in a leadership perspective would be kind of three ways to think about it. And it sounds, if you're thinking about an MBA, you're probably thinking more leadership, more management, more front end. So product ownership or product management might be another area to think of, especially if the MBA is interesting to you. Business architecture could also be another area. So like there's really no limit to where the skills can take you. And so I know there's no natural progression. But those are some of the big opportunities. So do you want to lead people or be a high level individual contributor? I think is a big question to ask. Do you want to go more project management or more product management, might leverage more of your BA skills or more technical? It's another kind of question to ask and then just start building that where you're at. So also like getting your PMP or going to an MBA, all great things. How can you start using that right in your role today? How can you get yourself invited to meetings where those kinds of questions that are and discussions are happening. So you're at least witnessing things. And, just like we talked about getting started as a business analyst, how can you just put yourself in the room to move forward in those ways, like in the here and now, and not wait for like a certification or a degree to kind of give you permission to do that, would be my other advice on that. It's just to set a goal for this year of something that you want to achieve in your current workplace, or even outside your current workplace, in a volunteer capacity or a training program, or just, in an exposure capacity, so that you're making progress right away. All right.
Okay.
Great
Well,
question. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah.
we are going to move towards wrapping up. So I want to remind everybody, this is Laura on LinkedIn, and please go ahead and take a look there, connect with her there, and of course at Bridging the Gap bridgingthegap-hyphens.com. And as for me, if I go back a slide, take a look at Eventbrite. I have a talk coming up next week on management, leadership, and just getting your job done. We have Angela Wick as another person I get to selfishly spend a whole hour with. I had the chance to spend this with the two of them together, and I said, no, I want to get to have one-on-one talks with you both because I never get that opportunity. So Angela will be talking in February. And I may be offering a couple of classes on intro BA stuff myself. Someone's approached me on it. I might do that, might not. We'll see how that goes. I'm not sure how this is going to work yet. And I am also, we have a lot of stuff coming up through February and into March, with people talking about their management experiences and what brought them into that field and what they have learned about it, and what they what they knew, didn't know, what the biggest lessons they've learned about becoming a manager have been, all that kind of stuff. We're having those folks who are working with me now on calendars. And for those of you who know, I realize we're down to a small number of participants now. I probably should have told this earlier. I will get this recording out there sometime tonight at the latest, I expect. So although we're down to 100 people registering, we'll have this out quickly for people to just let your friends know and so forth. So with that, Laura, thank you so much for coming today. I so appreciated our conversation and the words you gave our group that was able to be here and that will listen on recordings in the future. So
Thank you so much for having me and for making these offerings to the community. Appreciate it. All right.
All right.